Behind the walls of decoration and incense, crimes are committed in silence, and conspiracies are hatched in the shadows. From medical investigations to assassination attempts and kidnappings, from concubines plotting to a haunting past and plots to overthrow the imperial rule. Every step Maomao takes brings her closer to the truth, but it also puts her in danger. In this video, we take you on an exciting journey through the summary of the second part of the anime Kusuriya no Hitorigoto, Maomao's Diary, from episode 13 to the final episode of the second part. Prepare for explosive events, exciting investigations, and developments that will make you reconsider everything you thought you knew. The story begins when new eunuchs are welcomed to assist the imperial palace. We then move on to Maomao and Shaolan, when the latter asks if Maomao has connections abroad that could help her secure a job, as her term here is coming to an end. But Maomao, whose connections were limited to the House of Verdigris and Jinshi, refuses to interfere, believing such relationships would bring misery to Shaolan. Suddenly their new friend, Shisui, arrives, and Shaolan asks for help with her situation. She advises her to establish relationships with the middle-ranking concubines, taking them to the public bathing area to show her how. After bathing, they give the concubines a massage and some help, getting to know them and receiving gifts from them. Maomao then asks Lady Gyoqiu to accompany her two friends to the public bathing area. She agrees, despite Lady Hunian's objections. However, she explains that the area is a good place to gather information and follow rumor from the maids and concubines. Later, during their lunch break, the new maids ask Maomao to take their younger sister along, as she is extremely shy. Maomao agrees and introduces her to Shaolan and Shisui. Then they begin what they always do, with the younger sister, Seki, joining them. As they were about to finish, Maomao spots Lady Rishio nearby and offers to give her a massage and relaxation session. After they're finished, Lady Rishio offers them a cold drink as a reward. Maomao then asks, "Why do you come to the public baths when you have the right facilities? A private bathroom in your palace?" Mrs. Rishio replied with a look of mixed fear and anxiety, "There is a ghost in her private bathroom." Maomao asked her, "Why don't you consult Master Jinshi about this matter?" And indeed, the next day, while Maomao was doing her work, Lady Hunian came in to ask her to accompany her to Lady Gyoqiu, who was receiving Jinshi. Lady Gyoqiu asked, "What do you want from Maomao?" Jinshi told her that there was a rumor about a ghost in a concubine's bathroom. Lady Gyoqiu wanted to know who this concubine was, so she asked Hunian to accompany Maomao. Jinshi refused, citing the matter's confidentiality. He asked Maomao to go alone, assuring her that he would make sure Maomao didn't reveal anything. Everyone was surprised, as it was the first time Jinshi had ever called Maomao by her name. When he left, Lady Gyoqiu asked Maomao, "What happened between you two on that fishing trip?" She told them that the toad was to blame. Then Jinshi went to Lady Rishio's mansion, accompanied by Maomao and Gyoqiu. Upon arriving at the reception room, Jinshi asked Rishio to show them the bathroom where the ghost was. The head maid began to explain what Lady Rishio had seen, but the former head maid intervened and told Jinshi that Lady Rishio was imagining things, that she was merely seeking attention, and that the head maid needed to control her behavior. Jinshi then intervened and told them that he was thirsty so they wouldn't interfere. He asked concubine Rishio to tell him the details. Lady Rishio told him that that night she had been waiting for the water to cool down, because the maids were too hot when they prepared the water. After she finished, she opened the window because she felt warm. She noticed that the curtains were swaying, even though the outside windows were closed. She also noticed a shadow staring at her. Maomao asked her if there might be someone else in the room, but Mrs. Rishio told her that there was no one there but her and her maid, Conan, and that they had seen the ghost. They even approached it, but it suddenly disappeared. Maomao then asked them, after looking at the room where the ghost had appeared, was this room originally a storeroom? Conan, the maid, took them into the room and showed them that it had been transformed into a storeroom due to mold growing in many areas, which they had tried to hide. Maomao then asked Conan to show her the drain that drains the hot water in the bathroom. She then asked Mrs. Rishio, "Did you remove the plug the day you saw the ghost?" "Yes," she replied. After removing the piece of furniture near the window, the floor appeared to be in a dilapidated state. Maomao asked Gyoqiu to check whether the drain line passed through that area. They confirmed this after bringing a diagram of the mansion's drainage system. Maomao told them that the air moving the curtains was actually water vapor in the drain lines. Mrs. Rishio then asked, "So, what was the face I saw at the window?" Maomao looked around and found a brass mirror. She learned that Mrs. Rishio had used it before, and that it had been put away in storage after she had acquired a large glass mirror. Maomao told her to hold it, and she pointed it at the light coming from the window. A face was reflected on the wall. She explained that this type of mirror has a person's image engraved on it, and when the light is reflected, it appears. Mrs. Rishio then told them that the mirror was a gift from her mother and that the reflected image was her mother's. She burst into tears as she remembered her mother. Thus, this case, which was nothing more than a tangle of coincidences, was over. The next day, while everyone was sitting in the reception room, Lady Gyoqiu said that the fetus she was carrying was stroking its feet, unlike little Princess Lingli. This didn't go unnoticed by Maomao, who told them that this behavior indicated a high probability of a cesarean section. After some discussion, Lady Gyoqiu asked Maomao, "Is there any way to be certain?" Maomao replied that she could have her examined. She agreed, and after the examination, Maomao told them that the likelihood of a cesarean section was high, and that they should take precautions and bring help. Lady Gyoqiu and Hunian talked about bringing someone to help, but there was no one they knew and could trust. Maomao then told them that there was a doctor who could help, but he was classified as a criminal. Lady Hunian responded with a refusal. The argument began when Maomao said that this doctor was the best in the country and could be trusted. When asked, "Who is this doctor?" she replied, "He's her adoptive father." At this, Lady Gyoqiu silenced everyone and asked Hunian to inform Jinshi of the matter and bring him over. She assured him that she would trust the person Maomao had suggested, as she had never defended anyone before, as she had done now. Indeed, 2 days later, Maomao's father, Lumin, arrived at the palace. He went to Lady Gyoqiu's mansion to introduce himself and begin his work as a temporary doctor at the clinic. He then excused himself. The next day, Maomao is at the clinic with her father and the doctor, and her father begins writing. Maomao asks him, "What are you writing about?" He tells her that he usually writes warning sheets for palace staff and hangs them in visible places to encourage everyone to learn to read. He then asks her to take the sheet to the teacher, who can ask his students to copy it into multiple copies. Then Maomao goes to the teacher, and the teacher recognizes that the person who wrote this information is Lumin. He tells her that he knows his handwriting and has helped him in the past. Maomao asks, "What were you writing as guidelines?" The teacher tells her that they were general warnings, such as, "Do not use lead-based cosmetics," "Do not use strong perfumes," and "Do not pick plants in the garden without permission." But Maomao is worried. She knows that her father published these warnings with good intentions, but someone with malicious intent might see them as a weapon to commit harmful acts. How could this have happened? Did the previous poisoning incidents contradict the warnings issued 20 years ago? And who knew of their dangers and still exists, even though the palace changes servants every 2 years? The name Nurse Shinlu, who had lived through both eras, came to mind. She went to visit her and gave her a bottle of medicine. They sat down to talk. From their conversation, Maomao learned that the nurses had been in the palace since the age of 10, since the time of the previous emperor. They had probably been harassed by the emperor, who had a penchant for young girls. But, without evidence, Maomao couldn't accuse anyone. She excused herself, but her attention was drawn to the wall bookcase. Shinlu told her to take any book she wanted to read. A large book caught her eye, and when she opened it, she found it was about insects, reminding her of her friend Shisui. But, in surprise, she wondered, how could a servant like Shisui have such an expensive book, and even a notebook and the ability to draw? Writing and reading are unbecoming of a servant. Suddenly, the beautiful eunuch who was the talk of the maids entered. It was Sueri, the court girl who had pretended to be dead and escaped. She told Shinlu, "Maomao is clever. She figured out my attempt to fake death and all our plans." She threatened Maomao, "I'll hurt you if you call for help." But Maomao responded with a sneer, "Do you think I'll listen to you?" Then Sueri brought Shisui and said to Maomao, "If you don't listen, I'll hurt this girl." Then she asked her to escort her out of the palace. Maomao was surprised. "Leave the palace?" Sueri confidently replied, "I know the way, and I know you'll follow me. Didn't you want to know how to make the rebirth medicine?" The scene then shifts to Jinshi, who received a message from Mrs. Gyoqiu saying that Maomao was missing and hadn't been seen for 2 days. After considering all the possibilities, they couldn't determine the cause of her disappearance. He and Gyoqiu went to the clinic to ask her father about what had happened the last time she visited them, but to no avail, as they received the same information they had received from Mrs. Gyoqiu. Jinshi asked them, "Where is the cat?" The doctor replied, "The cat is also missing." That day, it was clinging to Maomao to give her some dried berries. Maomao's father, Lumin, then asked them to help them search for the cat, hoping it might be a clue to Maomao. After a long search, they found the cat surrounded by some dried berries and a leaf in a tree hole, but it was empty. However, Lumin asked them to follow him to the clinic. There, he held the leaf close to a candle, and some words appeared, surprising everyone. Lumin told them that Maomao had used this method to play when she was little. However, what was written on the paper were 2 words. The first was shrine, and the second was unclear. Jinshi took the paper to Lady Gyoqiu and asked her and the maids for help in figuring out the meaning of the second word. No one knew until the maid Seki said that part of the word was close to sui, and also included the letter shin. She might have been referring to shisui, a maid who accompanied her and her friend Shaolan. Jinshi was surprised by the presence of this maid, whom he had never heard of before, despite his familiarity with Shaolan. He ordered everyone to investigate and search for a maid named Shisui. That evening, Gyoqiu informed Jinshi that he had received a report that there was a shrine near the spot where they had found the cat, connected to an underground passage leading outside the palace, and that a new eunuch had gone missing on the same day as Maomao. As for the maid named Shisui, no maid by that name was recorded in the records. The story then shifts to Maomao and Shisui, who were in the hold of a ship sailing at sea. When they arrived, they took a mountainous path. However, Maomao, who had been thinking of escaping with Shisui, was surprised by Shisui's actions when she tried to protect Sueri from a nearby snake. She grabbed the snake and threw it at Sueri. Sueri fell to the ground in panic, and Shisui helped her calm down. At that moment, Maomao realized their close relationship and that Shisui wasn't a kidnapping victim like her, but rather Suiri's partner. They confessed to her that they were half-sisters, realizing there was no point in running away now. They continued walking until they reached a lively village. It turned out that the sisters were well-known people in the village, and that the villagers were preparing for an upcoming festival. The events shift to the Jade Palace when Jinshi goes to check on Lady Gyoqiu, whose due date is approaching. Dr. Lumin reassures him about her health and tells him that a cesarean section is unlikely, as the treatment Maomao gave Lady Gyoqiu is effective. However, at that moment, Jinshi becomes tense. He knows nothing about Maomao, who has been missing for 10 days, with no information about her. He leaves after asking Lady Hunyan to keep him updated on Gyoqiu's condition. He returns to his office after Gyoqiu informs him that he has obtained information about the missing eunuch. In Jinshi's office, Gyoqiu informs him that the missing eunuch is from a foreign country. None of those who came with him have recognized him, but he has been seen worshipping at a shrine in the imperial palace. Jinshi wonders in surprise. What's so strange about that? Maybe he's a priest? But Gyoqiu explained that the place where he was praying was actually a cemetery for girls who had lost their virginity to the previous emperor and died while serving there, and perhaps he had a relationship with one of them. Jinshi went with Gyoqiu to inspect the cemetery, and there they found a clinic employee who looked confused at the sight of them. As she passed by, Jinshi smelled the disinfectant Maomao had made. He stopped her and angrily asked, "Where's Maomao?" He then pulled himself together and asked again, "Do you know where the pharmacist who serves at the Jade Palace is?" The girl was confused and tried to escape, but he continued, "Do you remember anything that might help us?" She replied that she had remembered an old memory when she looked at his face and that he was an exact replica of the man who had taken her virginity when she was young and who had stopped visiting her when she was older. Jinshi became angry and asked her, "What are you talking about? What does that have to do with what I asked you?" But she continued, accusing him of disguising himself as Jinshi the eunuch and of looking like that man. She then tried to escape, while Jinshi remained in shock at what he had heard. She took poison in an attempt to end her life before being interrogated. However, the guards removed the poison and took her to the doctor's office for later interrogation. Gyoqiu returned to the shocked Jinshi to tell him not to be influenced by the careless words of a maid, but Jinshi asked him, "Do I resemble the late emperor so much that she would drink poison out of fear?" He then began to recall his past, and how he truly did not resemble his mother or his brother, the emperor, and how he had begged the emperor to approve his eunuchization so he could avoid the responsibility of becoming the crown prince. He then looked at the name written on the grave, where the nurse had been offering his condolences. He discovered that she was a court lady who had died a year earlier and had given birth to a daughter from a relationship with a palace doctor. If the child were alive, she would be as old as Suirin. Jinshi asked Gyoqiu to accompany him to the Red Garnet Palace, where concubine Roran resided. The concubine Taihu had served had later been given to Lord Shishu, who gave birth to concubine Roran, the current emperor's new concubine, who might know where the maid had gone with the doctor. Upon arriving at the reception room and speaking with Roran, Jinshi noticed a mole above her eye that hadn't been there before, and he also noticed that one of the maids was missing. He approached her and asked threateningly, "You're concubine Rainbow, aren't you? Where is the real concubine Roran?" The events then shifted to Jinshi's office, where he gathered all of concubine Roran's maids and servants. They learned that Roran had left and told them she would never return. While Jinshi was anxiously thinking about Maomao's whereabouts or condition, the scene shifted to Lahan, who was furious after one of his guards informed him that his daughter Maomao was missing. Then we return to Jinshi's office, as he gathers the evidence and information he obtained with Basin. Suddenly, someone knocks on the door. After being allowed in, it turns out that it's Lahan, Lahan's adopted son, who is as shrewd as his father. Jinshi asked him why he had come, and he handed him a file containing information on the National Treasury's expenditures, which he had worked on at the behest of his father, Lahan. Jinshi asked him, "What interested you after reviewing this information?" Lahan told him that the prices of food and metals, especially iron, had risen dramatically, and sarcastically asked, "Is the Empire planning to build a huge building somewhere?" Jinshi replied that the high price of grain might be justified given the volume of trade, but the high price of iron indicated that there were merchants buying iron in large quantities. Then he asked, "What do you want to deliver to me?" Lahan told him that he would investigate this information in detail, as only a few people were able to buy quantities that would affect the current price. Jinshi asked, "And what do you want in return?" Lahan replied that he wanted a discount for the damage his father, Lahan, had caused when he learned of Maomao's disappearance. Jinshi agreed to his request, provided that he was precise in the information he provided regarding the destination of the money and metals. The story then shifts to Maomao, who, with Shisui's help, is preparing to join the village's festival that evening. On their way to the shrine where the festival will be held, Shisui tells Maomao that this celebration was held because people who joined the village possessed great knowledge in harvesting and pest control, which led to the village's prosperity. The colors on the masks represent intermarriage between the villagers and those arriving from the west. So many men and some women here cannot distinguish between certain colors. Maomao recalls that the Empress was unable to distinguish between colors, just as she had during the previous visit with the Emperor. Does this village have a connection to the Empress Dowager? Maomao then wanders around with Shisui, who introduces her to the events taking place and tries to get her friend Maomao to enjoy the festival, until the final event takes place and the masks from the previous year are burned. They then head back to their residence to find Sueri waiting for them, but Maomao asks her if she wants to know more about the rebirth potion, as she promised. Sueri told her it wasn't that simple and lifted her hand to show her that these were some of the side effects of the rebirth potion, which could lead to total memory loss. She told her she would bring her a collection of books to read if she remained silent. After changing her clothes, Maomao was pleasantly surprised to find so many books for her to read. Sueri then told her not to think about leaving or running away, as the place was heavily guarded. But Maomao had already begun checking out the books and wouldn't run away, as she had found what she was looking for. While Shisui was styling Maomao's hair, and because Maomao had told her how clever she was, Shisui began to talk about how she was beaten when she was little if she didn't finish her chores quickly. Maomao asked, "Did you have a strict teacher?" Shisui laughed sadly and told her that was her mother, not her teacher. She then asked Maomao not to try to run away lest she be hurt, and then left the room. When Maomao grew tired from reading, she went to the window and opened it. Her attention was drawn to a small building around which the rice had not been harvested. Suddenly, when Gyoqiu entered, Maomao asked him about the building. He told her it was the village elder's old storehouse, but he thought they weren't using it anymore. Maomao asked if she could go inside. He proudly told her he knew a secret passageway he used to escape from studying. They set off for the storehouse, both curious about what they would find there. Upon entering the storehouse, they found a collection of medicines and rats in cages, making it look like an experiment room. However, Gyoqiu found a strange-looking metal rod. Maomao headed to an inner room, isolated by a curtain, and was surprised to find a workshop manufacturing fefa, the weapon used to assassinate Jinshi. Then they heard someone at the door and tried to hide, but the space was so small that they couldn't do so for long. They were arrested by order of Lady Shinmi, who was known for her harsh punishment. A look of panic began to appear on Gyoqiu's face, but Roran intervened and told her mother that they were just children playing. However, Lady Shinmi refused to punish Maomao, even slapping Sueri for trying to interfere. However, Roran told her that Maomao was a pharmacist, and that she wanted a pharmacist of her own. She wasn't convinced until Roran explained that Maomao was over 30, and she didn't look that way because she had been testing the drugs on herself and was now trying to determine which ones would treat aging. Lady Shinmi was convinced and left the storeroom, with the intention of bringing Maomao to their fortress so she could monitor her work on the drug. At that moment, Maomao realized that shisui was Roran. Upon arriving at the fortress, Maomao was given the room used by the previous pharmacist. When Maomao asked Sueri if she was Shisui's half-sister, Shisui told her that Lady Shinmi's family had adopted her father, Shishu, and that he had been betrothed to Lady Shinmi, but that she had been sent to be the emperor's concubine. Meanwhile, my mother and I were with Lord Shishu, my father, so all this hatred was born of me. Lady Shinmi was then sent as a gift to Shishu's parents, who were close to the emperor at the time, and they gave birth to Roran. Sueri then told her to pretend to make the anti-aging potion, since Roran had told them about it. Then the story shifts back to Jinshi's office, where he was receiving information from Lahan, who had told him that the northern fortress controlled by Shishu was expanding rapidly, even though it had been abandoned, and we hadn't been told it had been restored. But suddenly, Lahan enters, furious, and rebukes Lahan for his treatment of Jinshi, whom no one can tell whether he is a man or a woman. Jinshi tells him that he is aware of his resentment due to my helplessness and cowardice. But Lahan didn't stop. He continued to provoke Jinshi, even asking him, "What do you think you can accomplish by disguising yourself as a eunuch?" At that point, Dr. Lumin, Lahan's uncle and Maomao's father, entered the room and addressed Lahan, whom he respected. "I didn't know you thought of me that way. I didn't even become a eunuch of my own volition." He tried to calm him down, urging him to speak calmly and not be aggressive, as everyone has their own circumstances. Lahan then took a serious stance and addressed Jinshi, or no, he addressed the crown prince, the Prince of the Moon. He told him that he would pledge his allegiance to him as the supreme military strategist, and that he would present all the evidence against Lord Shishu, as well as the complete plan to end this rebellion. He would in turn serve as the crown prince to rescue Maomao and end the rebellion threatening the empire. Jinshi understood that to end this rebellion and hold Shishu accountable, he had to mobilize the imperial army and lead it as crown prince. The events then shift to Maomao, who was caught following a failed escape attempt by Gyoqiu. However, Lady Shinmi arrived, wanting to punish the guard and Sueri for trying to cover for Maomao. However, Maomao could not calm down and called her a crooked old hag. Her fury ensued, ordering the guard to take her to the water room to be punished. However, Roran intervened and asked her mother to punish Maomao by sending her to the insect and snake room. Lady Shinmi agreed, believing it would be a severe punishment for Maomao. Meanwhile, Maomao was enjoying the punishment, eating snakes, until the guard appeared and opened the door for her to escape, informing her that imperial forces were approaching to overthrow the fortress. Told her to escape upstairs and not use the lower gates, as they were dangerous in the event of a fire, as they were gunpowder factories. But Maomao was curious, and she ignored him. She then went to see the factories. Suddenly, a Roran entered, threw some money to the workers, and ordered them to take it and flee from this place because the imperial army was coming to attack them. She then set fire to the gunpowder store, and everyone fled. As Maomao left, she met Roran, who was surprised to see her. But when Maomao asked Roran to accompany her, she smiled and said she still wanted to finish some things. Maomao followed her to her destination, and they arrived at a room where a group of children appeared to be sleeping. Angrily, Maomao asked, "Did you make them take poison?" Roran replied, "That's medicine, not poison." Maomao then tries to urge Roran to escape, but Roran continually refuses, saying she has other responsibilities and duties. So, Maomao gives her her hair ornaments, wishing her luck and that they will meet again. Roran then makes one last request, to take care of the children, and leaves the room. The events then shift to the Imperial Army camp, led by the Prince of the Moon, Jinshi, a few days before the attack on the palace. Lahan begins explaining the plan to storm the castle. However, the plan relies on a surprise attack on the gunpowder stockpile to prevent the enemy from using the cannons. However, Gyoqiu, Commander Jinshi, warns them that he is now leading the royal army, and it is customary to fight face-to-face. Jinshi tells them to gather their troops and take care of the situation himself. He tells them that he will implement this plan to minimize any potential losses and that he will bear responsibility for it. They should begin implementing Lahan's plan immediately. Indeed, in the evening, the spearmen fired their cannons, triggering an avalanche that completely buried the armory. However, before the soldiers could retreat, the royal army, led by Jinshi, had already begun its advance. The battle was short-lived due to the chaos caused by the avalanche. Jinshi then entered the castle with a group of soldiers until he reached the room where Maomao was waiting. Fearing that the soldiers would mistake her for a relative of the enemy, she asked Jinshi for protection, and Genshi was relieved to see her safe. However, a soldier entered and called him the Crown Prince. Jinshi corrected him that he was no longer the Crown Prince, as Lady Gyoqiu had given birth to a child. However, Maomao realized that Genshi was the prince who had been feigning illness and not appearing in public. Jinshi then asked Lihaku to ensure Maomao's safety and move her to a safe place until the raid was over. When he approached Maomao and saw the children asleep, he asked the soldiers to help him carry them outside so they could be buried in a proper place later. He also asked Maomao to accompany him. Meanwhile, while Jinshi and the soldiers were searching for Master Shishu, they reached a room where some soldiers were. They raided it. Jinshi asked them about Shishu's whereabouts, but they replied that they had been tricked and knew nothing. But Basen began using force to force them to confess. Suddenly, Master Shishu appeared from behind them, carrying the newly developed weapon, the Viva. Jinshi showed him an order from the Emperor for arrest on charges of embezzlement and attempted mutiny. However, Shishu raised his weapon at a soldier who believed the weapon was inoperative due to its lack of a fuse. However, Jinshi, aware of the weapon's power, saved him after an assassination attempt. But as Jinshi and the soldiers prepared to confront this wondrous weapon, Master Shishu threw him to the ground, and the soldiers advanced to kill him. A look of astonishment appeared on Jinshi's face at Master Shishu's surrender. They continued searching until they reached the room where Roran and Lady Shinmi were hiding, and they dispersed to search. Until Roran appears and asks Jinshi to accompany her at gunpoint, until they arrive at a room where Swery and Lady Shinmi are. She begins to recount her mother's story after asking her, "Is Lord Jinshi anything like the previous emperor who abandoned you for a little girl?" She then continues to tease her when she tells her that she left her father, Shishu, to gain influence by accepting her as the emperor's concubine, ignoring his feelings and attachment to her. Even when he approached her to elope with her, she rejected him because of her greed. She then tells Jinshi that her father, Shishu, was the one who suggested expanding the imperial palace because the empress had issued orders prohibiting the slave trade, but it was the family's main business. The second reason was to gather all the corrupt people in one place so they could be easily eliminated. But in a moment of anger, and because she was ignorant of all these matters, Lady Shinmi struck her daughter, Roran, who provoked her again. She took the weapon and aimed it at her, but Roran had blocked the muzzle, so the bullet ricocheted into Lady Shinmi's face. Roran then asked Lord Jinshi for a favor, and after he agreed, she gave him a piece of paper with prearranged matters written on it that would take place in the country. He should be careful with her. Then the first favor was to pardon the remaining clan members, as her mother had banished them, and they had already lost their names, especially her sister Suiri. Jinshi told her he would do whatever he could to fulfill her request and asked about her other request. She retrieved the jewelry from her mother's hand and scratched Jinshi's face as revenge on her mother, on the man who bore the blood and likeness of the emperor who had ruined her life. Then she headed to the balcony to perform the final dance. As the soldiers entered, Basen saw the wound on Jinshi's face and became furious. He ordered the soldiers to kill Roran, who fell from the balcony, as her sister Suiri wept over her loss. After bandaging Jinshi's wound, he inquires about Maomao's well-being and whereabouts, and Gyoqiu tells him she's fine. He goes to check on her himself and finds her sleeping next to the dead children, having begged them to let her stay with them. Jinshi asks Gyoqiu to leave, as he will stay with Maomao until she wakes up. While Jinshi was looking at Maomao, happy to see her well and worried about her injuries, Maomao woke up surprised to see him. She stood up to see the wound on his face, but she was too tired to stitch it. Jinshi asked, "Were you close to Roran?" Maomao replied that she didn't know, as she had lived many beautifully eliminating the remnants of Lord Shishu's clan. Then the boy, Gyoqiu, appeared. He had lost his memory and suffered to serve her, given that Suiri had royal blood. Maomao then received a visit from her former classmate Gyoqiu, who conveyed everyone's greetings, and a message from Shaolan, who informed her that Maomao and shisui. Then you must now fulfill the other promise. Maomao wondered, is he listening to what I say and not interrupting you? He replied yes, but there was time with Maomao. After the troublesome little one left, a tired lap. A cheerful girl appeared in a market looking for something. After using the hair clip that Jinshi had given Maomao, we learned that